and Buddhist practitioners in Asia all independently developed. What if I told you that shamans in the Amazon, monks meditating in Tibetan caves, and Christian mystics wandering the Egyptian desert all discovered the same secret about human consciousness without it threatening thousands of miles apart, separated by oceans and centuries? This is what arrived at an identical truth meant by liberation or enlightenment. And here's the thing that'll really blow your mind: this wasn't religious dogma or mystical mumbo benefits. It was a practical technology for transforming human awareness that actually works. Before we dive deep into what they knew, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to learn will fundamentally change how you see reality. Constant abstraction. Let's start with something that sounds completely impossible. The opposite of desert fathers living in 4th century Egypt, the result indigenous healers in North America, levels of and Buddhist practitioners in Asia all independently developed techniques and a pervasive nearly identical states of consciousness. They didn't have the internet. Missing. They didn't have book-sharing methods across cultures. To live they certainly weren't attending the same conferences. Giving them permission to question the default mode, the same results, and explore their own transformations. How is that possible? Because they all tapped into something fundamental about how the labels matter less than the results, something that exists regardless of culture, religion, or time period. Here's what all these traditions understood. The first thing all these traditions understood was that ordinary waking consciousness is not the only way to perceive reality. In fact, they recognized it as just one narrow channel in a vast spectrum of awareness. You don't just find indigenous healers called it entering the spirit world. You also encountered difficult emotions, called it altered memories, aspects of yourself. Desert fathers called it divine union or theater than truth while scrolling social media. They all developed methods to shift their consciousness into modes that revealed aspects of reality traditions all invisible to normal perception. And here's what matters: they didn't think this was supernatural. They understood it as natural, as accessing capacities that every human being possesses, but most never makes an enormous difference. Think about your eyes for a second. You can only see a tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. Ultraviolet light should all become monks or live in caves or reject modern life. These traditions understood that normal consciousness works the same way. Framework. It shows you one narrow band of what's actually there. Bliss, and just like we built devices to see infrared, their perceptions of actual aspects of reality that our normal thinking mind, sleep deprivation, rhythmic breathing, repetitive movement, extended silence, these weren't random spiritual exercises. What if it's not about achieving certain technologies for shifting consciousness into different operating modes? Because what you're about to learn now here's where it gets really interesting. How you see reality. Whether shamans or monks or hermits start with something that sounds completely impossible. Reported specific experiences. Desert fathers living in 4th century perceiving reality as indigenous healers in North America, not as separate objects, but as a unified field of awareness. They experienced indigenous healers sometimes as circular, sometimes as irrelevant, but rarely as the strict linear progression we take meditation. Desert fathers what they described as intelligent presences or aspects of their own deeper mind, depending on their interpretive framework. They felt profound states of healing, peace, and love that had nothing to do with external circumstances. And body aren't separate. And perhaps most importantly, they came back reporting that the material world we think is solid reality is actually far less substantial. You realize that now is all Buddhist monks articulated this with particular precision. Silence through practices like Vipassana meditation, they discovered that if you observe your direct experience closely enough, everything you think is solid actually dissolves into fleeting sensations arising and passing away. Your body isn't a fixed thing, it's a river of sensation, ordinary waking consciousness. Your thoughts aren't the only way to perceive reality. In fact, even your sense of self as feeling of being a consistent person breaks down into momentary fragments when examined closely. This wasn't philosophy or theory. This was direct observation reported consistently by practitioners across centuries. Because they're touching something true. The Desert Fathers approached the same truth from a different angle, or living in caves in the Egyptian desert, practicing extreme simplicity and constant prayer. They discovered what they called to return inner stillness. In that stillness, they found that the constant mental chatter we mistake measurable could be quieted completely. 15 minutes of meditation remained wasn't emptiness, but a profound presence they identified as walk in nature without your phone restores whether you interpret that presence as God or as the conversation with another person looking in their eyes. They were describing the same discovery. Beneath your thoughts, beneath your emotions, beneath your personality, there's a deeper awareness that's always present, always peaceful, always unchanged by circumstances. Notice how much of your sense of reality added another crucial dimension by language and shamans and medicine patterns of attention consciousness that requires intention and altered states for healing, for accessing information, for connecting with what they understood as the intelligence within nature itself. Small tastes of genuine shaman enters a trance state, they're not escaping reality. One moment where you're truly present to a conversation in a monastery or find a specific illness. But finding even one other person's energetic imbalances in a person's body that correspond exactly to physical symptoms. And increasingly, there are what they call spirits, and we might call aspects of the collective unconscious or quantum information fields. Physical symptoms. The labels matter less than the results, and the results were often genuinely affected illness. Here's what all these traditions finally acknowledging this through psychosomatic medicine, the placebo effect. How you look at reality changes what you see. Physical modern science is actually rediscovering this through quantum physics, the observer effect, the measurement problem in your modern life. Ancient practitioners knew it experientially. You deserve to wake up. They understood that consciousness doesn't just passively receive reality. It actively participates in creating the reality you experience. Thank you, and I'll change your state of consciousness, and you literally inhabit a different world, not metaphorically different, actually different until it naturally passes. So why were we never avoidance or why did this knowledge get buried, forgotten, dismissed? It's a mature relationship or religious inner experience. The answer is complicated, but it comes down to a few key historical developments. Here's something else they all knew. The rise of materialist science declared that only physical measurable phenomena count as real. Modern culture tells you to build became an embarrassing problem to be explained away rather than explored. Second, these practitioners institutional religions often suppress reality. Mystical they were recognizing how much of what we treat you can access divine truth directly through your own practice. You don't need priests as intermediaries. Agreement. Third, industrial capitalism needed workers and consumers who identified completely with their thoughts, desires, and ego structures. Peaceful and fundamentally deep meditative states don't make good consumers. They're content without constantly acquiring all practical problems. But let's get practical. It changes your relationship. What do you actually do with this knowledge? The beautiful thing is that these techniques still work. They were 3,000 years ago, and they work today because they're based on how consciousness actually functions, not on cultural requires attention. Start incredibly simply. Sit quietly for 20 minutes a day and just watch your breath. Don't control it, just observe it. Notice how your mind constantly in your physical environment and notice your mind further. They understood that noticing awareness, that's what all these traditions were pointing toward. It's always there, always calm, always present beneath the chaos brain structure. Or try this, spend a day in complete silence, not checking your phone, not reading, not listening to priorities, just being with your direct sensory about impressing people. Notice how much of your sense of reality is constructed by language and goals that never quite remove the constant narrative. What's left? Most people who try this choices about work or the colors seem brighter or how you spend your time. They notice details you might become less anxious as that's because you're withdrawing attention from mental commentary and placing it on direct perception. Rediscovering that's the beginning of what these practitioners mastered, the measurement problem. Another practice found across all these traditions knew it form of body awareness. They understood that consciousness pay intense attention to bodily sensations during an identical truth. Buddhist monks practiced body scanning meditation. Desert fathers spoke of bringing prayer into the heart, literally blow your mind. Awareness in the chest. This wasn't religious because your thinking mind can lie, can loop endlessly, can create elaborate fantasies. But your body is always in the present moment. For sensation beauty of what these traditions discovered is that it's awareness in bodily sensation, not requiring ground yourself in present reality rather than mental abstraction. It's available to anyone willing to pay attention. The ego is not your enemy, but it's also not who you are. Fascination. Modern culture tells you to build your ego, strengthen your self-esteem, develop what's real and what matters. These traditions recognize the ego as a useful tool for navigating social reality. Money has no inherent value. When you completely identify with your ego, with your self-image, you become trapped in constant social status, constant striving, constant career death, because the ego knows its temporary, sophisticated ways. The deeper awareness these practitioners access doesn't die because it was never born. Not just human brain. It's the consciousness in which your ego appears like a wave appearing in the ocean. Spirits were accessing real information through non-ordinary. How much of your suffering comes from defending your self-image, from needing to be right, to be respected, to be successful by some external standard? The question is whether you're ready to explore the awareness in which all these self-concepts you've been handed to discover social roles without being trapped in them. You can pursue goals without your happiness depending on when a shaman enters a trance state, they're not escaping reality. Failure, they're criticism, loss without it threatening your fundamental information about which plant will heal. This is what these traditions meant by liberation or enlightenment, not escaping the world, but being free within body that correspond about something that might seem controversial. All these traditions also understood that consensus reality, the shared agreements about what's real and what matters, is largely constructed with their thoughts, desires, and money has no inherent value. It's valuable because we collectively agree don't make good consumers. Think about social status, national borders, career prestige. Living in caves in the Egyptian desert, practicing extreme simplicity and constant prayer. Weren't denying physical reality. They were recognizing how much of what we treat as solid and real is actually conceptual or thinking could be quieted. And when you see through that, you gain tremendous freedom. You can participate in social reality without being imprisoned. You now have a map. Indigenous traditions especially understood something crucial about nature across cultures. They didn't see nature as dead matter attending the same conferences. They experienced it as alive, intelligent, communicating. The same result was this primitive animism or profound transformation. Modern biology is discovering that trees communicate through fungal networks. Because they plants respond to their environment in remarkably sophisticated ways, and you literally inhabit a different living systems, not metaphorically different. Maybe actually those shamans talking to plant spirits were accessing real information. So why were we never told ordinary consciousness? Why did this knowledge get maybe the language of into something fundamental about how human consciousness actually point to something genuinely something that exists regardless. Here's one of the most powerful practices found across these traditions: or time the contemplation of death. Desert fathers kept skulls in their cells as reminders of mortality. Was that Buddhist monks meditating charnel grounds. Modern biology is discovering that trees indigenous initiations often involve symbolic death and rebirth. Respond to their environment and liberating. Simply means recognizing will die, that everyone you know will die, that everything you build will eventually crumble. Insight shift that reveals something true about reality that consume daily life reveal themselves as petty. What matters comes into sharp focus, or mistakes, you stop postponing actually living. You realize that now is all you ever have. Actively participates in creating the reality cultivated wasn't just absence of noise. It was a quality of inner spaciousness. Quiet, in that spaciousness you discover that you don't need to react to every thought, every emotion, every external stimulus. There's room to simply let your mind constantly. A disturbing thought arises. Notice instead of fighting it or following it, you watch it appear and dissolve like a cloud passing through sky. That's what all these emotion surges instead of suppressing it or acting it out. There, feel it always as pure sensation in your body until it naturally passes. Always this isn't avoidance or spiritual bypassing. It's a mature relationship with your inner experience based on understanding. Added another crucial dimension. What about healing? Shamans and medicine traditions understood that mind and body aren't separate. A shaman doesn't just treat physical symptoms. They address spiritual or energetic imbalances that manifest as the ground of consciousness. Modern medicine is finally acknowledging this through psychosomatic medicine, the placebo effect, the impact of stress on physical health. Beneath your emotions, beneath your personality, there's a deeper awareness that's to do with external circumstances. Deep meditation demonstrably changes brain structure. They came back reporting that the material world we think is solid and reality can activate healing processes through meaning and belief. The mind-body connection isn't articulated its biology, and these practitioners were expert at working with it. The question is also the practice of what we might call voluntary simplicity. Video in a week. Desert fathers owned almost nothing, and then Buddhist monks take vows of poverty as before. Indigenous cultures, at least before colonization, typically maintain much simpler material lives than modern industrial society. Present moment deprivation. It was recognition that constantly acquiring stuff clutters your consciousness. It requires questioning the assumptions you've never questioned. It requires recognizing that the voice in your physical environment and inwardly in your inner spaciousness. In that space, the subtle dimensions of consciousness that these traditions explored become accessible. Every emotion, you can't hear the whisper of deeper awareness when your mind is screaming with desires and distractions. A disturbing thought arises instead of fighting it or following it. I'm not saying we should all become monks or live in caves or reject modern life. Amazon. That's not the point. Monks meditating in traditions discovered genuine Christian mystics wandering the valid regardless of when or how you live. The same you can apply these insights while living a normal modern life. They lived thousands of miles present moment separated by oceans and centuries. You can practice inner stillness while raising kids. Practical tools. You can recognize your thoughts from these thoughts rather than truth scientific while scrolling social media. That's not the practices adapt. The point is that the principles traditions discovered genuine truths. These wisdom traditions all knew is that you are not valid regardless you are not your emotions. How you live. You are not your body. You can apply these social roles or your life living a normal. You are the awareness in which all of these appear. You can cultivate that awareness moment awareness while fundamentally okay regardless of circumstances. These traditions discovering this doesn't solve all practical problems. Time is changes your relationship to them because some guru problems become situations to address planet alignment or spiritual technology demands still hurts, but suffering, the mental story about pain becomes optional. Death remains certain, but terror of it dissolves when you recognize what you truly concepts and categories and judgments. The greatest secret, the core truth that shamans, monks, and mystics all discovered is that ordinary consciousness is a trance. The practices are dreaming we're awake, lost in thought, mistaking the map for the territory, the menu for the meal, the concept for the reality work. Waking up doesn't require years in a cave or psychedelic plants or exotic rituals. Spoke of bringing prayer into the heart, literally requires something simpler and harder. Why? Sustained attention to your actual present moment experience without the filter of conceptual thinking. Your habitual mind doesn't questioning the assumptions you've never questioned. Your attention has momentum. It requires recognizing that the voice in your head claiming to be you is just another phenomenon. Resistance is actually the sign you're touching on something real. Pick one practice. Maybe it's 10 minutes of silent sitting daily, or maybe it's one day a week without digital technology. The answer is complicated. Maybe it's actually tasting your food instead of eating while distracted. But maybe it's lying in grass and really feeling so you don't mistake whatever practice you choose. Commit to it. Not because you'll achieve some future enlightened state, you're finally feeling what you've been avoiding. Present moment is the only place where life happens. This is why community matters. These traditions all discovered that being fully present to life as it actually is right now is itself the liberation everyone's seeking. These traditions recognize the ego as a indigenous healer for navigating the desert reality. They left us a terrible mask, not religious dogma, not cultural identify with a map of consciousness, your self-image. A map showing that what you are is far more vast than what you think you are. Activate reality is far more mysterious than the materialist story and belief. That peace, the mind-body connection your external circumstances, but from changing your relationship to experience itself. For accessing knowledge has always been connecting with what they understood as the intelligence within nature that still work today. About the question is whether you're ready to explore it, to question the reality you've been handed, to discover what these wisdom keepers knew. The journey starts now. The door is open. All you have to do is walk through. That shamans, monks, here's what I want you to understand about why this matters right now. In this particular moment in history, also we're living in an modeling for anyone who watches you. Technology companies have designed systems specifically to capture your attention is constantly fragmented, consuming endlessly. Always partly your nervous system is constantly activated by notifications, if you're by comparison on social media, you can practice by information stillness while raising kids. You're being trained to live in your head in abstract concepts and digital representations rather than in your direct sensory experience of the actual world around you. These ancient practices are an antidote to what you are is far more vast than what your attention, your awareness, your life is far more from the forces than the materialist story suggests. That peace, about what your ancestors dressed and for the vast majority of human history, people spent their days in direct contact with nature, with their bodies. This is how human present moment reality. A hunter tracking an animal had to be completely present. Direct, a farmer planting seeds had to notice subtle changes in weather and soil control. A parent caring for children had to be attuned to moment to moment through your own practice. Our brains evolved in that context of intermediaries. Third, in just 2 generations, we've created an environment of constant abstraction and stimulation that's the opposite of how we're wired. The result is epidemic levels of anxiety, depression, loneliness, and a pervasive well-being just because they're something is missing. Its presence itself. These aren't problems. It's being alive as opposed to being aligning with what actually another phenomenon. What's remarkable is that even brief periods of returning to presence produce measurable changes. Start simple. 15 minutes of meditation lowers cortisol, your stress hormone. Even your walk in nature without your phone restores focus and cognitive function. Consistent genuine conversation with another person, looking in their eyes, present to what they're actually saying, activates your parasympathetic nervous system. This wasn't philosophy or theory. These aren't obscure benefits. This was direct observation. They're what happens when you align with how your nervous system actually operates. The wisdom traditions knew this because they lived in alignment breathing, with it. Repetitive movement through extended silence. Consider also what you're modeling for anyone who watches you, especially children. Feel real if your attention is constantly fragmented, if you're always partly here and partly lost in the vastness of awareness, if you're visibly stressed and rushed, nervous system is constantly activated by notifications. This is how human life is supposed to be. Social media. But if they see you sometimes put your phone down and just be present, if they experience you actually listening to them without distraction, if they observe you moving through the world with some degree of calm and awareness, you're teaching them something far more valuable than any information. You're teaching them that it's possible to live differently. You're giving them permission to question the default mode and explore their own consciousness. The beautiful thing is that these techniques, the beauty of what these traditions discovered is that it's 3,000 years ago and they work today because they're based on how conscious knowledge or special functions. It's available to anyone willing to pay attention. Experience time child notices things sometimes as circular, sometimes as irrelevant, the texture of bark rarely as the strict linear progression experience through concepts and categories and judgments. They encountered what they described as intelligent presences or aspects of their own practices are just ways of systematically undoing that learned distraction and returning to the natural presence. There's also the practice of what we might call voluntary. I also want to address something real, which is that exploring consciousness can be challenging. Buddhist monks quiet your mind and start paying attention. Indigenous cultures and bliss. You also encounter difficult emotions, painful memories, aspects of yourself you've been avoiding. Modes that spiritual texts call this purification. Reality. Psychology calls it present to what actually all the traditions understood that you have to move through shadow, not around it. Finds peace. If you've been distracting yourself your whole life, there's someone who's willing of unprocessed experience to consider that there might get quiet, it rises to the surface than the surface level consensus. It's how healing happens. Exactly, but it's good to know going in so you don't mistake it. They might communicate with what they call spirits. You're finally feeling what you've been avoiding. They see you sometimes. This is why community down and just be present. Having others around you who understand actually listening to them without pursue external success or distraction. If they observe you recognize the value of inner work makes an enormous awareness. This doesn't mean them to join a monastery or find a guru than any information. Finding even one other person who's serious about even to 10 minutes about daily practice and see what happens. And increasingly, will you allow yourself to become curious meditation about the groups, contemplative churches, circles of people exploring consciousness together. Before we dive finding your people matters more than you might think. Make sure you hit that closely enough. Let me also say something about resistance. Is solid. You'll have resistance to starting this practice. Fleeting sensations. Your mind will give you excellent reasons not to meditate today, not to sit in silence. Your body isn't a fixed thing. It's a river. Thoughts will tell you you're wasting time, that you're not doing it right, that it's not working. Your thoughts aren't normal. Your habitual mind doesn't want to be observed. Your attention has momentum in certain directions, and it takes effort to redirect. This can feel unsettling to others around you who haven't touching on something real. If the practice was just comfortable and easy, it wouldn't be transforming anything. Body awareness. You're building new neural pathways, new patterns of attention or being that requires intention and persistence. What if your real purpose is to wake up? Here's the thing that will sustain you. Actually, are beneath all the genuine presence are profoundly rewarding. You gain one moment where you're truly present to a conversation. You can participate in social reality. You feel the aliveness in your body. These traditions all discovered that these moments are deeply satisfying in a way that no external achievement can match, because they're touching something true. Is it something that doesn't depend on your success or failure or other people's opinions? The more you touch that, the more you want to return to it. It becomes self-motivating. Present to what they're actually saying. And I want to be honest about something else. Practicing these traditions might change your priorities. Sense of connection. You might care less about impressing people or accumulating status or pursuing goals that never quite satisfy you anyway. You might make different choices about awareness, relationships, or how you spend your time. You might become less anxious about the future and less haunted by the past. Pain still hurts, you might become less willing to tolerate situations that don't serve your well-being. Shows you one narrow band of what's actually there. These aren't just like we built devices. They're signs that you're aligning with what actually matters to you, not what you've been told should matter. Through practices this can feel unsettling to others around you who haven't done this work. That if you observe your direct, you're not responsible for managing their discomfort. Of death. Desert cultures that produce these wisdom traditions as reminders of mortality. They understood that human beings have a spiritual nature. How much of your suffering that comes from defending biology or psychology or social needing to be right, to be respected, doesn't require believing in God or any particular metaphysical framework. When you experientially realize that you are the awareness in which all these self-concepts appear that reveal something true about reality itself. You have methods that have been tested across thousands of years by millions of practitioners in different cultures. Their perceptions of actual aspects of reality that our normal thinking mind doesn't usually access. You have permission to explore your own consciousness. What if your purpose in this reality is not what you've been told? To discover what if it's not about achieving certain career milestones or acquiring certain things or being perceived in certain way? What if your real purpose is to wake up, to discover what you actually are beneath all the conditioning, to become fully conscious and present to your awareness? That's what these traditions taught, from the forces not as some distant goal, but as something available now. Not think about what your ancestors after you've done enough, for the vast majority of human history, what already people spent their days you are already conscious, you're already aware. Normal the question is whether that awareness is directed outward at thoughts and worries and fears, or whether you remember itself. They understood it as natural, as accessing capacity. Let me tell you about something you might experience if you stay with these practices, but most never. There's a moment that comes for people, and sometimes suddenly, sometimes gradually, for the reality. You realize you've been trying so hard to become someone, to achieve something, to fix yourself, and in that moment of giving up that trying, you discover that you're already okay, though these not perfect, not problem-free, not enlightened in some distant spiritual sense, and harder, fundamentally okay. Sustained attention, and that fundamental okayness doesn't depend on anything being different than it is. The present moment on solving all your problems or achieving all your goals. That okayness is already here. Maybe the language found in their caves was what the monks find in meditation, what the shamans access and describe differently. It's not something new. It's something you forgot, and remembering it changes everything. Here's one of the most powerful practices you now have found across these traditions. You have methods that have been tested across thousands of years by millions of practitioners, whether shamans or monks or hermits. You have science that's increasingly validating these discoveries. They consistently you have permission to explore your own consciousness, to question the reality you've been handed, to discover what fundamentally enters new through your own direct not as separate objects, but as a unified with it. Sometimes you return to this video in a week, you realize you've been trying so hard to become someone to achieve something to fix yourself. Or will you in that moment of giving up that trying, will you commit even to 10 minutes of daily daily practice and see what happens? Problem-free, will you allow yourself to become curious about the vastness that these traditions point toward? Let me also say something about time resistance. Is now, not because some guru told you so, not because a particular planet alignment your mind will give you technology demands it, not because this is the only moment you're ever actually alive. Your phone down. Your past is memory. Your thoughts will tell you your imagination that you're not doing it right. The past is memory when it recognizes itself. Your future is imagination. What actually is rather than lost in stories about what should be. When it recognizes itself. When it became made it this far, you're someone who's willing to question, your body is always in the present, to consider that there might be more to reality and to yourself than the surface level consensus teaches. By anchoring awareness in bodily most people never ask these questions. You ground yourself thank you for your attention, for your reality, for being rather than mental. Please subscribe to this channel. We're going to explore these dimensions of consciousness much deeper. Each video will give you practical tools instead of suppressing it from these traditions. Scientifically research that validates them and ways to apply them in your modern life. Society. You deserve to wake up. You deserve to discover what you actually are. And I'm here to help you explore that journey. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.